One of the standout albums from my early years of metal discovery was definitely the 1983 debut album from Metallica. And while the band has come a long ways from Kill 'Em All, I would like to talk about my initial impressions of this album when I first bought it, as well as the cover art and the lyrics, and how my feelings might have changed about this album over time. So, let's rant. And of course, since this is a vinyl channel, I'm going to quickly go through my own copy on vinyl. This is the original Megaforce Records pressing. There were 3 variants, A, B, and C. This is the B variant. B and C did not come with a printed inner sleeve, so no lyrics or liner notes, unfortunately. This is a rather expensive little copy in my collection. By the way, this is not the original copy I had as a kid. We'll go into that later. I bought this at a local record store, paid $140 for it, because I had to have it. This is probably near mint on the vinyl, and then the cover is probably a good VG+. Pretty excited to own it, no matter how much I paid for it. It's one of those albums. You just want to own it, because it's great. I do want to talk a little bit about the background of this album briefly. Obviously, the album came out in July of 1983 as their debut album. At this point, guitarist Dave Mustaine is out of the band. They kicked him out. He was a bit of a troublemaker, as we all know. They brought in Kirk Hammett from Exodus. He had about 4 weeks or so to learn the material, to record. I mean, that's how quickly they brought him in. Metallica did pretty well with this record, with independent sources. This album didn't break them, of course. They did go on tour. They went on tour with Raven on the Kill 'Em All for One tour, which is amazing. Their album is obviously Kill 'Em All, and All for One is Raven's album at that time. I believe their 3rd album, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a basic background on Kill 'Em All. I didn't want to go too into depth about that because I want to talk more about my initial impressions of this album. So let's do that. So how I initially discovered this album, I gotta say, I didn't pick it up at first. Every week back in 1984 and on, for a number of years, my buddy Eric and I would go to Strawberry's Records and Tapes. I was the one outside of Worcester, Massachusetts, in Shrewsbury at White City, which is a detail none of you really care about. We'd hit the metal bin. The metal bin was full of independent metal, which we really enjoyed. There wasn't any Motley Crue or Dokken or Rat or any of that. That's music we did like, but the metal bin there at Strawberry's had a very special connotation to us in the sense that this was metal we weren't seeing everywhere. Obviously, it wasn't on MTV, it wasn't on the radio. It had more lurid or violent covers, and I think when you're 15, 16 years old, that's a lot cooler to you. So we would look through the bin, and I remember this record months before the fall of 84, let's say. This is probably spring at this point. This album would pop up, and Eric and I both passed it up, and it's kind of funny. I don't know his reasoning for that, but I certainly remember mine, and I don't know if it would be the same rationale I would have at this point if I discovered the album for the first time, but at, the time, 15 years old, my reasoning was, first and foremost, the name of the band. Metallica is a stupid band name. No matter how you feel about the band then or now, it's kind of irrelevant. They're kind of stuck with that name, and they probably don't care. I mean, they're billionaires now. Why does it matter? But back then, I was like, it's kind of a dumb name. I thought the logo was drawn pretty cool. But other than that, I didn't care about the name. Also, the cover art itself is very minimalist. It's kind of artsy in a weird way with the light board. It more implies something than states something outright. And at 15 years old, as a burgeoning metal fan, I wanted album covers that were graphic. I wanted pentagrams and skulls and fire and all of that stuff. Which probably means that I bought the Slayer record before I bought this one, because Show No Mercy was definitely in those bins back then, as well as some other great albums. So we kept passing this record up, and I remember probably in September of 1984, and I've told this story once or twice before, but I'm going to tell it again because we're talking about this album. My buddy Eric comes over to my house, and he's really excited, and he's got a record in one of those brown paper flat record bags. And he's like, you have to hear this album. This album is amazing. And he wouldn't let me see the cover or the name of the band or any of that stuff. So he puts his back towards me so I can't see what he's doing, puts the record on the turntable, and we're listening to it. So it starts up, and the opening acoustic intro happens, and I'm like, oh boy, an acoustic intro. No one ever does that. So, but it was nice. It was whatever. And then, of course, the song kicks in, and I'm 16 years old, just staring at the stereo. I'm like, Jesus, who the hell is this, right? Eric's not going to tell me for a while. He lets me stew for about 3 tracks. I think we were in the middle of For Whom the Bell Tolls before I basically was going to strangle him. I'm just like, tell me who the hell this is, right? So he pulls the record out. It's Ride the Lightning. And I'm like, hey, it's that band we've been ignoring for like how many months now? And he's like, yeah, I know. So I was like, a new album. Great, cool. So we listened to the rest of the record. And then I can't remember if it was that night or the next night, but I remember going to Strawberries and buying this record and Ride the Lightning together. But what's funny about that is my impressions of this record, when I finally did hear it 24 to 48 hours later, can't remember, is that Ride the Lightning is technically the first Metallica album I heard. So that was the baseline. That was the comparison chart for me. So when I then put this on, I was like, oh, this is okay, right? It sounds like a demo. In fact, it still kind of sounds like a demo in a lot of ways. So I listened to it a few times. It was a grower probably over a period of maybe a week. But by the end of the week, I was all on board. I loved this album. Whiplash was my favorite song on the record. It's still one of my very favorites now. The Four Horsemen is a big one for me. Later in probably 89 or so, I'd be in a band. I would cover the Four Horsemen. I was a vocalist at the time. I wasn't playing bass in this particular band. And I have grand memories of the Four Horsemen. Pig-piled a bunch of kids with the mics singing along kind of thing. And so this album does have some deep nostalgia for me. I might talk a little bit about that later on. Maybe so, maybe not. But that was the discovery of this album, and it's kind of funny, you know. I went in thinking this album is going to be boring as all hell because of the cover for some reason, and then I ended up loving it. We should talk about the back cover too really quickly, because I think another initial impression I had of it was this back cover. And the picture of the band in particular, I didn't get a vibe that these guys were metal guys, and I don't know why, because I look at it and I kind of see that they are, but they kind of have more of a sort of 70s dirtbag rock band kind of look to them. I mean, Cliff could have easily played in Foghat or whatever. Again, I think my impression then with that was that this is 1984 for me. And the 1980s were a very image-conscious decade with bands. I mean, you've got bands in costumes. You've got Motley Crue. You've got Kiss, of course, and so many other bands that the sort of t-shirt and jeans looks to me seemed like more of a bygone era at that point in time. Again, bands like, you know, Foghat and maybe Triumph and Boston and arena rock bands and stuff like that. Stuff I really wasn't into. So that might have turned me off as well. So that factored in as well. Also, the quote is interesting. Bang that head that does not bang. It says R. Birch 83. Richard Birch was sort of a super fan of Metallica. He would show up at all of their shows, and all the Bay Area shows realistically banged his head lots and lots, and he was kind of known for that. So they tributed him by putting him on the back of the cover. In the 80s, I didn't know that. I would find that out much later, but another little detail about the record. There you go. We should also talk about the name of the album, Kill 'Em All, which, by the way, in retrospect, really should have sold me on the record right away. I don't even know what my logic was at 15. Dumb kid, I guess. Anyways, the original title for the album is supposed to be Metal Up Your Ass. The idea of the illustration for the cover was that it was a toilet with a hand coming out with a knife. Great. The label was a little down on that. I believe it was because they didn't figure they could get the distributors to get on board with it. They probably couldn't market it well, that sort of thing. Cliff Burton in particular was pissed off about that, so he went on this big rant about, you know, kill the marketers and kill these people, the distributors and all these people, just kill them all. And thus the title of the album was born. Of course, Metal Up Your Ass as a name or an illustration at the very least ended up on Metallica t-shirts not too soon after this, especially in sort of 84-85. I saw a lot of people wearing that shirt, including a buddy of mine. I don't know if I ever bought one. It's a cute idea. Kind of okay with the name Kill 'Em All a little bit more. Doesn't really matter. As for the tracks on this album, they're pretty basic. They're pretty simple, especially the lyrics. The lyrics are very simplistic. Also, there's clearly a little bit of a new wave of British heavy metal influence on this record, probably coming from Lars and James in particular. If you listen to the No Life Till Leather demo, though, it's a lot worse. I mean, they did shed a little bit of it to do Kill 'Em All. If you listen to the version of Hit the Lights on the demo versus this version, you'll hear way more of that. I know in the chorus on this one, he's like, hit the lights. But on the demo version, he's like, hit the lights, and you're like, wow, low rent Sean Harris from Diamond Head. Thank you. So that's kind of fun. Of course, by the time they get to Ride the Lightning, they've completely shed the Nawabum thing, and they've more or less tuned in or honed in on their own sound. I think a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that Kirk Hammett is more established in the band. Dave Mustaine's lyrical and musical influence has kind of gone more out the door. There are only 2 songs on Ride the Lightning that Mustaine co-wrote and all of that. And they're really not even the bigger songs on Ride the Lightning. So I believe the title track as well as Call of Cthulhu. So there's that. Also, lyrically speaking, there seems like there's a little bit of what would become US power metal in here. In fact, Metallica was actually calling themselves power metal back then, which is kind of funny. But some of the lyrics remind me more of bands like Manowar and maybe Virgin Steel as well. But Manowar in particular, I kind of imagine that songs like The Four Horsemen and Phantom Lord in particular, at least lyrically, could have been covered by Manowar and would have made really effective songs by that band. Which is kind of funny to say, but it's also true. As for some of the other lyrics, definitely they border on downright silly. Sometimes they actually just cross that line. Some in Whiplash come to mind. Whiplash, my favorite song on this album, even. The line, we'll never stop, we'll never quit because we're Metallica. First of all, they self-reference another Manowar thing, incidentally. But it's just weird. I can imagine cheerleaders doing that line because it just has that kind of, we'll never stop, we'll never quit because we're Metallica kind of thing. Sorry if I ruined the song for you by doing that, but it definitely has that sort of cheerleader thing going for it. And those are early lyrics. Can you really fault them? They were very young when they did this album. I mean, there are definitely bands who were younger when they did their debut albums. Death Angel were teenagers when they did theirs. Creator were teenagers when they did theirs. So you can forgive some of that stuff on a first album. Not that big of a deal. Sadly, you don't hear Metallica really doing many of these songs live anymore. Seek and Destroy seems to be the one they pull out quite a bit. It's a fan favorite. It's my least favorite song on this album, by the way. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I was kind of coerced into covering it in bands, especially the band I was in 1989. I never liked it, and I think I never really liked it because I couldn't sing it. It was not in my register. I sounded awful singing it. Interestingly enough, The Four Horsemen I could pull off with great aplomb. And I don't know why there's a difference there, but that's the case. I think I just got sick of constantly being egged on to do Seek and Destroy. Let's do Seek and Destroy. I'm like, no, let's not. So anyways, some of that colors my opinion of the song. But it is sad that they don't do a lot of this album live anymore. And I'm wondering why that is. I haven't read enough interviews with them where they talk about that at all. I do know that Tom Araya from Slayer isn't really crazy about Show No Mercy, their first album, as much. They still do songs from it, but he's not crazy about the record. Maybe it's the production, maybe it's the simplistic songwriting. Again, these are first albums. I wonder if some bands look at their first albums sometimes and go, no, I don't want to concentrate on that as much. I don't know. It's still a great album, albeit demo-y sounding, right? So that's a question for me. And maybe I'll just look into it a little bit more and find the answer. But for today, I don't know why they only do Seek and Destroy for the most part. I mean, maybe they do Hit the Lights on some acoustic set on a boat somewhere. I know Kiss does the Kiss Cruises and they pull out the deep cuts, but I don't know. I'm sure there's a Metallica fan out there who's like, they've done Jump in the Fire 57 times, here, 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 and here. If you're that fan, and I'm sure some of you are, you can let me know in the comments. But anyways, Seek and Destroy seems to be the one they pull out, and not all the time either. That makes me a little sad. So reviews of this album at the time were kind of mixed. Independent media, especially metal media, were crazy about this album. Everyone else pretty much panned it. No one wanted to hear this. But interestingly enough, modern reviewers, even of the big websites and magazines, are there magazines anymore? There probably are, rave about this album like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, as my grandma would say. Which is funny. Maybe they were a little ahead of their time in that regard. Maybe it just took everyone a while to get into the album. As I say that, I feel like that's probably the answer. In 1983/4, I was looking for music like this. I wanted heavier, more aggressive music. And this was really my entry, this album and Ride the Lightning, and my entry into thrash metal. I was really excited about that musical form a lot. There's also a lot of speed metal going on this record. I think they get a little more thrashy as they go. But Yeah, so there it is. One thing I was considering before I turned the camera on, actually, is that it would have been kind of interesting to discover Kill 'Em All first and Ride the Lightning second. And I wonder how that would have colored my interest in this band and my opinion of the other album. I don't know. I think Ride the Lightning would have still been the most amazing album to me, regardless of order of when I heard it, because I was blown away by Ride the Lightning. Obviously, I told the story. I was pretty excited back then, and a little excited telling the story now, of course. So I kind of wonder about that. Of course, you've probably discovered Metallica in a sort of mixed order. Maybe you came in on Saint Anger. Maybe you came in on Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Maybe you came in from the beginning. Who knows? You should let me know in the comments when you came in and how you feel that might have colored your opinion or your receptivity to other Metallica albums. That's an interesting discussion I'd probably like to have with you. So definitely let me know that. And that's my rant on discovering Kill 'Em All by Metallica. You should definitely let me know in the comments how you feel about this album. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Over the decades, has your opinion of it changed? I definitely feel like mine has. I feel like I like this album even more than I did way back then. Also, tell me about your discovery of this album in particular. I know a lot of people aren't 53 years old like I am. Some people are very young. They came in on a different album. And in a different time, too, which kind of colors your opinion of music in general. I mean, even I was a year late to this album. I mean, clearly I wasn't, hearing the early stuff. I'm sure there are 60-year-olds out there, for instance, who can probably hold that over me and go, I was at L'Amour's in '83 and I saw them with TT Quick, things like that. So we're all going to be where we are when we come into a band. So let me know a little of that too in the comments. So if you saw the last episode of this rant show, you know that this was a little bit different. I'm wanting to cover a wide variety of rant-style topics. And of course, if you have any ideas along that, maybe some suggestions, this is yet another reason you can use the comments. Let me know what those ideas might be. I'm actually going to come up with other stuff. Also, let me know if you want me to do another classic album. I have memories of plenty of these albums. So let me know all that as well in the comments below. Of course, if you're just coming to this channel based on watching this video and you're like, hey, who is this weirdo dude talking about Kill 'Em All and using funny voices in the process? My name is Matt. This is the Accusation Network. I do metal vinyl collecting videos each and every week. Occasionally, I also talk about classic and modern metal bands. If that's of interest, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and you know what? Share some videos with some friends, especially on social media. But you can go out in the street and do it too. People will think you're weird, but F them. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.